Percentages converting from fractions and decimals using number chips. And this is the football version. So this is a digital lesson. It starts out by giving some very basic, simple conversions of decimals to percentages. So if we look at the decimal 5600ths, we would write it this way as a fraction. Because percentages are a comparison out of 100, 56 100ths would be 56%. So it shows those conversions from decimal to fraction to percentage. And then one whole would be 100 out of 100 or 100%. So the next slide, students are going to be moving the number chips. So this is pretty simple. It's a good slide to practice moving the number chips. So every slide has all of the numbers the students need, and they're just going to be converting from a decimal to a percentage. So 1200ths would be 12%. Click and hold on the edge of the 12, move it into place. 5900ths would be 59%, and so on. And then one whole would be 100%. So you're just going to move all of these into place. Now you can also convert a decimal to a percentage by moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. So here we have 6200ths. If we move that decimal point 2 places to the right, we get 62%. Same thing on this one, 5900ths. Move the decimal point 2 places to the right, we get 59%. Now we have a 1 and 7400ths. Again, if I move that decimal point 2 places to the right, I get 174%. Now, if they have to move the decimal point 2 places to the right and there's no number here, they just have to add a 0. So that would not be 3%, that would be 30%. So you want to go over these with the students. On slide 5, students are going to be moving the number chips into place. So they have to be very careful. So this one would be 65%. This one, if I move the decimal point 2 places to the right, would be 6 and 5/10%. This one, I have a blank space. I have to add a 0. So this one would be 70%, not 7%. And here our 7% would be over here. And then 23% and 230%. So good practice. Now, to convert a fraction to a percent, one method is to convert your fraction to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. So here I can see I have to multiply 20 times 5 to get 100. If I multiply the numerator or the denominator by 5, I have to multiply the numerator by 5, so it's an equivalent fraction. So I get 45 hundredths as a decimal, which equals 45%. So the next slide, students are going to be doing that. They're going to be first converting their fraction to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator. So we want our denominator to be 100. I can see that I have to multiply by 5 in the denominator. That means I have to multiply by 5 in the numerator. And I get 30 hundredths, which as a decimal would look like this. I have to move the 3 and the 0, which would be 30%. So they're going to be converting their fractions to equivalent fractions with 100 in the denominator. They're going to do that on the next slide. Same thing, and then same thing on slide 9. Now, sometimes you can't directly convert your denominator to 100, so you may have to simplify your fraction first. So if I have 18/40ths, I can simplify by dividing numerator and denominator by 2. I get an equivalent fraction of 9/20ths. Now I can convert it to a fraction with 100 in the denominator by multiplying numerator and denominator by 5. So now I get 45 hundredths, which would be 45 hundredths as a decimal, or 45%. So simplifying your fraction first. Students are going to do that on the next slide. So if I simplify 6/15, I can divide numerator and denominator by 3. That would give me 2/5. Now I can multiply 5 times 20 to get 100. If I multiply the numerator times 20, I get 40. So 40/100ths. As a decimal, I'm going to move the 4 and the 0 to give me 40/100ths, which would be 40%. So students are going to be simplifying first, then changing to an equivalent fraction with 100 in the denominator, then changing to a decimal, and then a percent. Students are going to do that on the next slide also. Now you may not be able to convert to a fraction with 100 in the denominator, so in that case you have to use long division. So here 5/8, you're going to take 5 divided by 8. This is an example of the division they're going to have to do. They get 625 thousandths as their answer. To change it to a percent, they're going to move that decimal point 2 places to the right. So the next slide, most of the division is done for them. They just have to find the quotient here. So 8 goes into 10 one time. And here we get 8 times 1 is 8. I subtract, I get 2, bring down a 0. 8 goes into 22 times, which is 16. Subtract, I get 4, bring down a 0. And 8 goes evenly into 45 times. Now I have my quotient as a decimal, 125 thousandths. If I move my decimal point 2 places to the right, and we have a movable decimal point here. So same numbers. And if I move that decimal point 2 places to the right, it's going to be here between the 2 and the 5. So I get an answer of 12.5%. Now the very last slide, students are going to have to do all of the division themselves, move the decimal point into their answer. So this is a digital lesson, percentages converting from fractions and decimals with number chips.